Event modeling is very crucial for a well-designed and scalable event-driven architecture. And unfortunately, a lot of developers are actually running into 4 common pitfalls that we're going to discuss today, so that after watching this video, you're the one who can actually avoid those. Now, when we talk about event modeling, we are talking about this message that eventually ends up in a message bus, be it a Kafka or RabbitMQ message, because it looks straightforward, but actually the business dictates how this message should look like, and eventually our subscribers are the ones who are concerned about the shape of this message. So aligning those two kind of parties is not a straightforward thing. This is why we're going to learn and look at some coding examples, and I promise it's going to be really fun. By the way, today's video is sponsored by Coder, but more on that later as we go further in this video. And by the way, all these 4 anti-patterns are coming from a really cool guy on the internet, Oscar Dudish, who writes a lot about event-driven architecture or just architecture in general in his newsletter, so go check it out. I'm gonna link it in the description. Now, with that said, we're gonna start with the very first one called property sourcing. Now, property sourcing pitfall basically tells us that you really need to double check when you create an event because they might be way too granular. That's why sometimes based on the business context, you can group them. So for example, if you change the first name or a last name, this is an event. Do you really need to create an event, or can you batch them all together? Now let's take a look at an example, and this is a bad example because every time a first name has changed, we emit a separate event called first name changed. Every time an email changes, we emit an email changed event. This is way too granular, all right? And then when we publish all of these events, our message bus is going to be spammed in a way. Now, a better solution is actually business driven, all right? So you really need to take a look at how your application and your business needs these events. For example, when you update your user profile, can't you just create one event called user profile info updated and then include whatever the changes are? For example, if the first name changed, include the new name. If the email didn't change, keep the old email or leave it empty as it is. And then the subscriber or the consumers will be able to take whatever value is new from the message. Now, of course, you might argue that some of the events need to be granular, so there's no way around. And you're totally right. For example, when it comes to emails, emails can trigger other things down the road. For example, it can trigger a verification workflow, it can trigger notification changes and so on. So yeah, for emails, maybe it does make a sense to create a separate type of an event called, for example, email address verification requested, or even for marital status changes also makes sense. Now, I will make sure that my Node.js example is running to reproduce this. So I have 3 endpoints. So I'm gonna run my client to see how the endpoints react. So the client shot request to all of the endpoints. And we're gonna see that we have the wrong way where we created 2 events, and we have the correct way where we grouped the events that are in the same domain. Now, where does this example even live? Where's my Kafka hosted? Where's my Node.js coming from? Well, all of that is running within my Coder workspace. And what is Coder anyways? Well, Coder provides an AI development infrastructure with secure, scalable environments where humans and AI agents can build software side by side. It's totally open source, so it can be self-hosted or somewhere in the cloud. And basically, the big picture would look something like this. Let's say this is our Coder workspace, and these are the developers, and you are one of the developers. And instead of running all of the code on your machine, what you're gonna do is utilize the Coder workspace. So you're gonna connect to this Coder workspace, and the Coder workspace is not empty, all right? The Coder workspace is gonna be defined by your Terraform file. So the Terraform file is gonna tell the coder how the whole infrastructure within the workspace should look like. Maybe you want some containers here within the workspace that are then being hosted on either AWS or some other provider, maybe Google Cloud. And then you can actually pull your repositories that your team or you are working on, so that they're also within the workspace like this. And now, instead of onboarding every new developer, trying to fix their laptop so that the code runs on their machine. And by the way, this kind of eliminates the saying this works on my machine, but it doesn't work on yours. because developers are all connected to this single environment, and all of that code lives there, and all of these containers are living within one coder workspace. So no one is actually running this code locally on their computers. Okay, this is very handy. And last but not least, we also have coding agents that Coder also supports, meaning you can literally throw a coding agent inside and it can take over the mundane tasks or repetitive tasks, such as writing a unit test, for example, for the code that you push, or constantly checking the typing of your code and things like that. Basically, I would prefer the coding agents to be for maintenance. And when we talk about the environments, basically we have workspaces, which are derived or built upon the templates that you define. So I have multiple templates and I have only 2 workspaces, one on AWS and one running on my machine locally. You can also do that for testing. And of course, we have tasks that are basically AI agents that are going to run in the background. If you're interested, go check it out and let me know how you like it. Now back to the pitfalls. Well, the next one being state obsession. What is state obsession? Basically, it's an anti-pattern when you model your events around state changes instead of what actually happened. Basically being way too generic. For example, saying balance updated, right? I mean, why did it update? What exactly kind of a balance updated? Instead of saying deposit recorded, which eventually updates your balance. This kind of helps us lose the business context. I mean, helps, it's actually bad. And eventually this is going to lead to issues with auditing and compliance. So basically the mindset should be what happened instead of what is. So if we look at the bad example, we're going to see that we have an event called balance updated. And as we said, this is way too generic and meaningless. A better way would be making these events around your business facts. Meaning one of the business facts would be a deposit recorded, or for example, a cash withdrawal that then actually leads to the updated balance, right? This is really good for auditing and compliance, and this is the way the events are supposed to be. And if you want to be very pragmatic, you can also include the amount, and you can also include the previous balance and current balance, but this is really up to you. The next anti-pattern that we have is clickbait event. So clickbait events are events that carry some information, but this information does not give us the full picture, and it might lead to some issues such as subscribers receiving notifications, but then they have to still query some kind of a database to get the full picture of what the data might look like. Also, this might lead to race conditions because, as we understood, we need to query some additional databases, and this is going to lead to exponential growth of API calls because these calls are going to be chained because you don't have enough information. It's a clickbait event. Now, one of the examples would be, for example, if the shipment status changed, then we say the shipment ID. Is this really enough? I don't think so, because this is giving us a shipment ID, but this is not giving us any picture, like why did it change, where the shipment is actually headed, and so on. Meaning, in order to get the full picture after this event, or by reacting to this event, you would have to query the databases with this shipment ID. In order to make the life of your subscribers easier, this is how you should do it instead. For example, if the shipment status changed, you can just put all the relevant information in it. For example, the status, the carrier, the estimated delivery, and so on. Or if something was delayed, you can just put a notification with complete information. For example, the reason, a new estimate, or you can just add a tracking URL to let the user to have a separate URL that they can query to track this information. And last but not least, the anti-pattern where everyone just wants to add one more field to the event. Like, your events should be as slim as possible. They are not just a JSON property or JSON dictionary that can grow exponentially, because you need to keep them tidy. Now, this one basically tells us that if people keep adding new fields to every event, every object, then this is going to lose the business context, because a new developer comes into the team and asks, why do we even have this property here? Is this business relevant? Maybe the subscribers are reacting to this property, but most of the time not. At the end of the day, this is going to lead to spaghetti events, and this is something we want to avoid. So for example, let's take a look at this set of events. We have 1, 2, and 3 events, and all of them have this customer ID. But in fact, only one of them should have the customer ID, meaning these customer IDs that we added are kind of redundant. We modified our schema, or we modified our event just so that we can satisfy one of those subscribers dealing with the customer ID. Instead, what we can do is just leave our events as they are and either go for one of the approaches, which is just having some metadata in your event. All right, we're going to leave all of that data and we're going to introduce this new object called metadata, where we put the customer ID and whatever you want, for example, team ID and source. And this is much cleaner because you're not cluttering your main scope of the event. Or solution 2, you can accumulate this data in a read model, meaning your events are staying as dry as possible, meaning as you can see, these guys don't have the customer ID. But when you are accumulating for a read model, meaning your subscribers are going to be reading this final data, you can actually map over these events and create a list of messages, which is also going to, at the end, include this customer ID. This is pretty much it. If you liked these quick 4 tips, let me know in the comments below. If you have any questions or remarks, let me know as well. I'm going to see you guys in the next one. Take care and goodbye.